Hello, Algebra Support students. This is an assignment given to you by your Algebra 1 teachers. You are going to, if you can't print it, write it out on a separate sheet of paper, take pictures, and upload it to your parallel class so you get credit in your parallel class. And then, if your teacher assigns the assignment on big ideas, enter your answers. We're actually using the big ideas format so you can see what answers to choose. But if your teacher only assigns it through paper, then you can just upload your pictures in their Google Classroom. But again, if they want you to do it in Big Ideas, just go to Big Ideas and upload those. So you get double credit. All right, let's get started. So let's solve this equation using square roots. So I just want to remind you the perfect squares. Okay, so 1 times 1 is 1, but simplifying 1 to 1 doesn't help. So you could say the square root of 1 is 1, but that one we never do because it doesn't simplify. It stays the same. Now, what number is 2 times 2? Then you can figure out that square root. That's 4. I'm not going to do them all. I'm just going to go to 10. If you don't have these, write them down because it does make everything a little better, a little easier. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 9 is 81. 10 times 10 is 100. We could keep going, and you should have a multiplication chart. I will upload one to Google Classroom as well so that you do have that. All right, so let's go ahead and solve the equation x squared minus 16 equals 0. So when you have x squared and no other x's, see, this negative 16 doesn't have an x, and neither does this 0. Then get x squared alone, and we're going to move that to the other side. So let's add 16 to both sides. Remember, when you're going across the equal sign, you do the opposite so that they cancel, called inverses. And 0 plus 16 is 16. So when you have x squared, the way you get rid of the squared is you square root. But something important to remember, and I'm going to change colors so that this really stands out, is you need to include plus or minus. Okay, really important. Anytime you put the square root. If you are given the square root, then you don't need to do that. But if you have to put the square root in, then you do. So this becomes x on the left. That's why we square rooted, so it could get rid of that squared. Plus or minus is just going to stay, and it's 4. So there are going to be 2 answers here, plus 4 and minus 4. So let's see if we can find them. So negative 4 is right there, and positive 4 is right there. And we're good. I don't see any other solutions. This one, again, we don't have x's. All we have are x squareds. So it's 3x squared. Whoops. Forget to change. 3x squared plus 12. Oops, minus 12 maybe. Oh no, it's plus 12. Is equal to 0. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get x squared by itself. So do you know if we're supposed to move the 3 or the 12 first? Well, you're supposed to move the 12 first. It's a weird looking 12. And the reason you do that is because the 3 is multiplied. You go in reverse order when you're solving equations. So those would cancel, and you get 3x squared is equal to negative 12. We still don't have x squared by itself. There's a 3, and you divide to get rid of that. So you have x squared is equal to negative 4. The way you get the square root, you put square root. Remember, when it's square root, you have to include plus or minus. And what that does is, on the left, it makes just x. Now, if you put the square root of 4 in your calculator, it gives you an error. So there is no way you can square root of 4, but because there was a negative in there, you cannot. There is no solution for this one. This one has no solution. So since there's no real solution, we just circle that one right there. All right, number 3. Again, we have just x squared, no x's, so we can solve like a regular equation, but get x squared first. So it's 2x squared minus 98 is equal to 0. You should have a calculator handy, or if you have a computer, open Desmos. So again, let me ask you, what number are we going to get rid of first, the 2 or the negative 98? The negative 98 has to be moved first, and we're going to move it across the equal sign, so let's add 98. You have to do the opposite when you're going across that equal sign. So those will cancel. 2x squared is equal to 98. Some people get tempted here to square root, but do you see there's still a 2? You can't square root until the x squared is completely alone. So how do you get rid of that 2? Yep, you divide. So let's divide. Take a moment, do 98 divided by 2 in your calculator and see what you get. By the way, you can always pause this video at any time, and so you can try it and check, especially if it's making sense. Did you get 49 when you did 98 divided by 2? So we have x squared on the left, and you know what? I'm not really happy with this. This looks it's a little close, so let me just fix this. There, that way you can see the next line a little separate, okay? So square root, and let's include plus or minus. When you square root, you have to include plus or minus. So the answers would be plus or minus. The square root of 49 was on that list. It is 7. So let's pick our 2 answers. We're going to have positive, and I should have explained this. When you have plus or minus, that means 7 and negative 7. Okay, the plus we don't need. But to show 2 answers, then you do put plus or minus. So there's negative 7, and I see positive 7 right there. Again, if your teacher wants you to go to big ideas and input it, then you just input it. All right, number 4 is a little different than what we've seen because it has parentheses. Since those parentheses are all, the squared applies to everything, okay? So all we have to do is, there's nothing else besides that. Whatever is squared is by itself. So we can actually just take the square root right now. So let me write over here. So it's x minus 1 squared is equal to 4. So we are going to square root. Do you remember what we have to include when it's square root? That's right, plus or minus. So the square and the square root all cancel, and you don't need those parentheses anymore. Plus or minus, remember we put that square root there, we have to do that. And do you know what the square root of 4 is? All right, at this point what I want to do is I want to make 2 different answers, and I'm going to do here, I'm going to make 2 different equations. X minus 1 could equal positive 2, you don't need to write the positive, and then x minus 1 could equal negative 2. So there's the plus and there's the minus. Now you've got 2, I call them baby equations because they're so cute and adorable. And x equals 3. That is going to be one of my answers. Pause the video and try the next one. Unpause when you're ready. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. Again, if you're getting confused with those, just have your calculator handy. So we're going to circle positive 3. I see a negative 3 here, but that's not the one. Let me keep looking for positive 3. I actually don't, oh, there it is. Had trouble finding the positive 3. There There it is. And then -1 is right there. All right. Let's go on down to number 5. So x squared plus 6 is equal to 13. Let's see. So I first want you to realize that there's no regular x, there's only one and it's x squared. The other thing I want you to do is just pause the video and try to get x squared by itself, and then push play and make sure you've got it. All right, to get x squared by itself, -6. And you get 7. Do you know how to get rid of the square? Yep, square root. And because I'm introducing that square root, I need a plus and a minus. So x is equal to plus and minus 7. Now, so that means radical 7, negative radical 7. I actually can't simplify the square root of 7 because it's not a perfect square. But when I read these instructions, it says solve the equation using roots. That's what I've done. Round your solutions to the nearest hundredth. Well, that is going to take the use of a calculator. So let me input a screen from Desmos. Okay, I went to Desmos. I typed in radical 7 and negative radical 7, and this is what I got. So I took a little picture of it, and I inputted it here. To the nearest hundredth, that's what that's asking for, the nearest hundredth, that would be 2 decimal places. So hundredth would be 2.64, negative 2.64. But remember, when rounding, you always have to look at the number after. And the rule is, if it's 5 or bigger, it's actually going to change the last decimal. So that 5, because those are 5s, that's going to be 2.65 and negative 2.65. So when you input, because this is a computer, if you don't input properly, it will count those of you that have to input it. So those answers are going to be not 2.64, but 2.65. And negative 2.65. There we go. All right. Let's go on to number 6. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, if you are understanding, is to pause the video and then come back and check and see how you did. Okay? If you're still stuck, you might just want to keep playing the video and doing it with me. So 2x squared minus 9 is equal to 11. Again, we don't have a regular x, so I need to get x squared by itself. So let's add 9. Always undo addition and subtraction first. And 11 plus 9 would be 20. I can't square root yet. Do you know why? It's because of the 2. So how do I get rid of the 2? And then how do I get rid of the square? And what do I need to remember on the right side? That's right. You got to remember that plus or minus. So x is equal to radical 10. And negative radical 10. Let me read these instructions. This is solve using square roots. We did. Solve to the nearest hundredth. So I have to go back to Desmos and calculate. So let me do that. All right, I've inputted the screen from Desmos that I get. Again, they asked us to round to the nearest hundredth. Hundredth is 2 decimal places. Oops. And what we're looking at is that third decimal. Is that 2 powerful enough to make that a 7? It either stays the same when you're rounding or goes up 1. And no, the 2 is not powerful enough. It needs to be 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So my answers are going to be 3.16 and negative 3.16. The thing that let me know they wanted decimals, not the actual radical, because sometimes we like that answer, is this little squiggly equals. Those are 2 tildes, and it means approximate or about, which means that you cut some decimals off. You're not showing the entire answer. If we would have left it as square root of 10, that would be x equals radical 10, or square root 10, x equals negative square root 10. But they didn't have equals, so that's how I knew they wanted me to go to a calculator. All right, so number 7 is asking us to use the graph, which is nice because those can be a little tricky, and we'll look at those probably next week. We need to solve, where does it equal 0? Well, it equals 0 on the x-axis. Okay, that's where we're going to look. Where does that graph touch? And if you're seeing what I'm seeing, it touches right here and right here. Those are my two solutions. Okay, it's nice when you can see a graph. So the question is, what does x equal right there? What does x equal? And I think x equals negative 1 because that 0 is where the y-axis is, and that's back 1. And right here, I think x equals 1, 2, 3. So again, we're going to find those two answers. Negative 1, there's negative 1. Oops, it didn't quite work. There we go. And positive 3. There we go. Done. Number 8. When we look at this one, again, it's equal to 0. This equal to 0. Oops. This equal to 0 right here tells me it's on the x-axis. Whoops, I missed the x-axis a little bit that time. There we go, that's better. And where? Oh, for me, I'm only seeing one answer right here. Right there. Okay, and that looks like it's right at negative 4. So right there, x equals negative 4. And it doesn't touch any other place. So I think that's going to be our only answer right there. X equals negative 4. All right, number 9. Find the zeros. Again, because they said zeros, okay, we want them here. Now, this is interesting. When it says least to greatest, they're saying go from left to right. Least is on the left, greatest is on the right. So do you see 3 zeros? I see a 0 here, here, whoops, and here. So my question is, what does x equal right there? Well, x looks like x equals negative, whoops, I thought it was negative 3, but let's count. Here's 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. Okay, the other one would be negative 2. Oh, I never wrote x equals negative 4, sorry. This one right here would be x equals negative 2. And this one right here would be x equals negative 1. So we have 3 answers for this one. Okay, and this time they just want you to write the zeros are negative 4, negative 2, and negative 1. So you're not circling and you don't need to write x equals. You just write the answer. All right, number 10. Why don't you pause and see if you can do this one, and then unpause to check your work. Finding the zeros means along the x-axis, and I see 2 zeros. Here, looks like x equals negative 3, because this is 0, negative 1, negative 2. Yep, that would be negative 3. And here, that one's clearly pointing to 1. So again, in order from least to greatest means go from the left to the right, because negative 3 is smaller and 1 is bigger. All right, I think this is our last problem. Find the 0. They're telling you in the question there's only 1. So again, pause, check your answer. That word 0 means along the x-axis. I'm seeing it right here, and that is x equals 5. And we are done with homework 9-2. Thank you. I hope you find this helpful. But if you have questions, please email your support teacher, your mentor, or your algebra teacher, or do all three. We're all here to help you. Bye now.